Hey, what's going on everybody? How Now Videos. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at how to take a massing model, both from SketchUp, and then I'll also show you how to export it from Revit and bring it into Photoshop to create an architectural elevation rendering that looks like this one here. This is our inspirational image that we are moving towards. These are some of my favorite resources that you can use for this kind of project. So Wild Textures is a great way to get some good patterning, high definition textures. I also would highly recommend architectures.org. This is actually the first place I would go and check, and then if they don't have what you need, I would recommend going to Wild Textures. MrCutout.com, there's many websites like it. There's also like pimpmydrawing.com, but basically they're like pre-cut out objects that you can go and download and put into Photoshop pretty easily without having to deal with cutting around maybe another existing photo. SketchUp.com is /free is a great way to access the SketchUp software that I'm about to show you. But then if you're using Revit, I'll show you a couple ways to export your line work as well using Revit instead of SketchUp. So either way, we're going to cover both in this video. Also, coolors.co is an awesome website to get color palettes, and I recommend exploring the trending palettes as a quick way to go and find like grayscales and natural tones and just any color swatches that you think kind of fit the theme and style of your project. The earth tones, there's tons of them. And then also I would recommend getting the watercolor splatters from brusheezy.com. This is a great Photoshop brush pack to bring in to add a little bit of accent on the back of your design. Okay, so let's take a look at SketchUp and see how we can export the scenes, the images that we want to bring into Photoshop. So we need to think of it as two different things. We want to have scenes that are easy to select in Photoshop, and then we want ones that actually have the style and shadows that we're looking to show as the final line work in Photoshop. So we want to export two different kinds of images. When you first open up SketchUp, by default, you'll have perspective mode on. So if you go and click on the glasses down here, no, the scenes, you'll see the different perspective modes. We'll see, well, perspective, and then we'll see parallel projection. So what I first want to do is go to parallel projection, and then I want to find the side that views my house straight on. The other thing I want to note is that you can change your backgrounds. So I want to go with like a nice white background. So we do that under style. So I'm going to go here to the little style symbol on the right, and I'm going to go and choose a construction documentation style right here. This is the most clean version. And you'll see that even though my model here is actually white on top, it kind of casts this kind of shadow on the roof for some reason. So I'm going to just click on this style and kind of ignore the shading on the roof for the time being. We can go and change that in Photoshop. So once again, I need to see this from like a straight on view. From this point, I don't want to orbit, I just want to pan and position my camera with a good zoom to keep our image resolution high when we go and export this. The other thing I want to do is take out this y-axis line that we see going across. So we can go to the glasses here, and we want to uncheck axes, section cuts, and guidelines. So that way we have a nice clean white model. Once we have this and everything's nice and cleaned, then we're going to go to the little action scenes icon and hit the plus sign to create a new scene. And here it's going to save all of our settings, everything we changed about the style, everything we changed about the axes and the construction lines, as well as the view zoom and the view orbit. So all of that will stay pristine, and we're going to build off that going forward. Before you do anything else, you don't want to zoom out, you don't want to orbit. If you accidentally do, you can just go and double click on the picture to get right back to that scene. And then from this scene, we want to change the style and then save it as another scene. So up here in the styles setting, we want to go to sketchy edges, and here you want to find one that you like. So you can just click on a bunch of them and just cycle through them and just come up with the style that you like. Okay, I've already found the style that I like, so for the sake of this video, I'm not going to go through a ton of them. I think I did one of the Style Builder Competition winners one. I think I chose pencil on graph paper. No, I chose one of the ones up here. believe it was this one or something similar. Anyways, once you choose the style that you like, then we want to go to the sunglasses and turn shadows on. To turn shadows on correctly, you can go to the hamburger menu and say add location, and this will you can add a geographical location to your site so the shadows cast exactly how they're supposed to in real life. And once you do that, you can also do the date and time. So here I chose the summer solstice, so June 21st at noon, and then this gives us an example of how the sun's going to hit in the middle of the summer in this location, which is kind of cool. So we're going to do shadows on and the style. And once you have that, you're going to go back to the little action stick here and hit another plus sign to add another scene. So here I have a front elevation with just the lines, and then I also have a front elevation with sketchy lines. And so here's the one that I had chosen. All right, so now that I have those two scenes, now we're just going to go and export those two scenes by going to the hamburger menu, go to export, and go to PNG. When you go to export PNG, I chose transparent background. It just makes it a little bit easier for me in Photoshop. It still gives us the SketchUp symbol, so we still have to crop that out anyways. If you don't choose transparent background, it's not the end of the world, but I would suggest turning that on. Check that off and say export PNG. Here you'll see that I have my elevation lines and my sketchy lines with shadows. From here, we're going to go and make a Photoshop file. And then I have some color swatches, coolors.co. We can go to that website real quick. You can make some nice color swatches there. So I would recommend that as well. And we can use cutout for the trees, and we can use wild textures and architectures.org to get our materials here. Same kind of export settings in Revit. So if you're using Revit, what you want to do here is take a flat-on view of your structure. And once again, my windows are a little messed up here from SketchUp. I just brought in a SketchUp file here into Revit. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to export one just like this. So you go to File, you would go to Export, you would go to PNG, or Image, and then here for your image settings, we would go, I like to go up to like 2000 pixels. We do our current window, that's fine, or you can select the sheet of just this item. And then JPEG lossless, since we're trying to make this a nice rendering. These are the settings that I typically would use. You want to make sure you don't have anything else that's exporting. So we'd export one like this. This would be our selection layer. And we'll say cancel just for sake of time. And then we're going to go and turn shadows on once again in like your projects. So under like the Manage tab, you should be able to set your location here to get your shadows correct. And then once our shadows are on, we can change our style. So if we go to Visual Cube, or the Visibility Cube here, we can go up to Graphic Display Options. And here we can go and change a little bit of jitter and sketchy lines. So we can go and say enable sketchy lines, give me a little bit of jitter, give me a little bit of extension, apply. And we can see how that changes our drawing. So maybe a little bit less jitter here, apply. Maybe a little bit, let's say 1, apply. So it's not perfect, but it kind of gets you going in the right direction. Kind of how SketchUp had different styles. So you have a little bit of control over your styles, not as much as SketchUp here in Revit. But then you would just export this as well as another image and just bring that out into Photoshop. All right, now I think we're ready to go into Photoshop. So in Photoshop, this is not a finished product, but this is generally where we are heading. And so basically to bring this in, let's just go and create a new image, but you can kind of see how I'm organizing my drawing here. I wanted to show you this to start off. But basically we can go and say File, and then we'll go to New. And here, what I want to do is set up a paper that I think I'm going to be using most common. So I'm going to do a width of 17 and a height of 11. And 300 pixels per inch is more than enough for what we need. RGB is a pretty common color mode nowadays. It's best for digital. And it converts to CMYK, okay. And then from here, let's go and say okay. So we're just going to have a blank sheet of paper. Let me go and show you how I would be importing in these items. If I go to just my folder here that I have, I can just go and take the 2 items that I want and drop those in. I'm just going to hit enter right away. Now these 2 items, this is a good example, they don't line up exactly. So what I want to do is just go and scale this. And to scale it, I'm going to throw the sketchy lines on top of the other image. And the sketchy lines, I already know I want to do a multiply effect on those. So that's what I just changed right up here, multiply. And I'm going to go and line up this bottom corner. And then I'm going to drag a guide down and throw that on the top. I'm going to go to the bigger image under this elevation selection line one. I'm going to highlight that layer, hit Control T. And then I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to drag to the top right to kind of fill that corner up. And then I'm going to use my arrow keys to nudge it around a little bit and drag it maybe up a tiny bit more. And just start to align these lines. It's not a perfect practice, but it gets you pretty close. Well, let's hold down Shift as you drag that corner to make sure it stays in the correct proportion. Something along this line is pretty good. Hit Enter. Remember, when we're done, we're going to not have the selection part on here. We're just going to have these sketchy lines. We're just going to use the selection layer here. Drag this guide out of the way to select regions. And those regions, we're going to make folders for those parts of the element. So let me give you an example. I'm going to hit the magic wand. I'm going to be on the front elevation line layer. I'm going to select my roof, hold down Shift, select my other roof. I see that there's a part here that became selected that I don't want, so I'm going to go and do the marquee tool here, rectangular tool, and then I'm going to hold down Alt to get the minus sign next to my selection box. I'm just going to go and grab the areas I don't want to be part of my roof selection. Okay, so now you can see I just have the roof parts outlined. And then I'm going to make a new layer here, and I'm going to make a layer mask for this layer. And then from here, I like to make a folder. Call this folder roof. I'm going to throw this inside the roof. Now, those of you that are like Photoshop fiends and pretty good in Photoshop, I think you might be able to even just take this into its own elements. I always link it to a layer. It's just kind of how I practice. But if you hold on Control and click on it, you can select those areas. And that's how we're going to be using this layer mask for future layers as well. All right, so I'm going to hit Control D to unselect that. All right, so that's the roof. To get the brick, the areas where brick is going to be on this thing, I'm just going to go and use the magic wand, elevation lines. And let's just stop at brick though. I'm going to just hold on Shift, select these areas that have spots that brick is going to go. So it's going to kind of sweep along this first story of the house, and then the chimney. So that's the chimney. All right, cool. So now that I have that, I'm going to go and repeat this practice. So I'm going to do a new layer with the clipping mask for a selection on that. I'm going to minimize that roof one, make a new folder. I'm going to call it brick. And then I'm going to go and drag this layer into the brick folder. And so now if I expand the brick folder and if I hold on Control and click on that layer mask, I have that clipping pre-made. Okay, cool. Control D to unselect. Now we need to go and drag in, or actually we need to open up our textures. So I'm going to go to File and I'm going to go to Open. And here I'm going to go, and this is if I went to like architectures.org and I downloaded a texture, which is really easy to do. You can figure it out. I'm going to go and select that, and I'm going to go and open up the texture that I downloaded. So I'm going to go to Open. When this texture opens, it's tileable, which is nice. These websites are high definition, tileable textures for the most part, so they're really friendly to use in Photoshop, which means they go next to each other really well, side by side, top to bottom, to provide a seamless texture. So then from here, if you have any issues with how this comes into Photoshop, you could go to Image, and you can go to Image Size, and you can dial down the size. So you're going to see that when I bring this in, I might have to dial this down to like 400 pixels wide for these bricks to show up at the correct scale. So you'll see what I mean in a second. So I have this open right here, finished grade common brick. I'm going to go to Edit. I'm going to go to Define Pattern. Once again, this is I opened up a new file of this image. So Edit, Define Pattern. And here we'll just call it what it's called here for the file name and say OK. And then for our untitled rendering in Photoshop, here's the magic. Under brick, I'm going to click on a new layer, and here we'll just title it gray brick. And then let's hold down Control and just grab that selection area, so we can see that got selected. But we're still in the gray brick layer. And then here we go to Edit, and then we're going to go to Fill. And we want to fill it with the pattern we just made. And we're going to go and select that gray brick pattern over here off to the side and say OK. And it comes in like almost like stone, right? So this is way too big of a pattern. So we can just go back to this gray brick, and we're going to go and change this. If you guys know a better way, let me know. I couldn't find a way to scale it through this, but this works really well for my purposes. So then here I'm going to go to Image. We're going to go to Image Size. And before we do that, let's just go and kind of ballpark about how small we want that to be. So I want this brick to maybe be like 1/4 of the size is what I'm thinking. And so that gives us an idea of how much to decrease this. So let's go to Edit, Image Size, and about 1/4 of this would be 400 pixels. And I keep the link on here to keep the proportions the same, and then say OK. So now that became a lot smaller. Then we have to go back to, I don't think we can just save it. We have to go to Define Brush Pattern again. And I'll keep the file name the same, but I haven't found that Photoshop overrides this, so we're just going to say OK. Then in Photoshop, this is where it gets a little clunky. You're just going to go to Edit and Fill. The pattern you want is the latest one, goes like to the right and to the bottom. So this is the one. So see how it did not override that one? So we go here. It's a little bit of guess and check, but it saves you a ton of time. So here's our brick, nice and easy in there. Control D to undo. Here you can see we can turn on and off our brick. What's nice is we can do a gray brick. We can duplicate this layer, try a different tone, try a different effect, try a different material. Even if we wanted to change out the brick. We will not be for this project. We're just staining it different colors to change it from the existing to a different effect. But this is a great way to control these different aspects of your project by having these little clipping mask layers to select and then to bring those in. Once that's all done, we would go and turn on our shadows and sketchy edges, and we'll turn off our selection. And you can kind of see how this would head in the direction of our inspirational image. So I'll go and throw that up on here again. And so you can kind of see how that aligns. We can see here in the selection, it's good to check this early on, that we're just a little bit off on the left edge. So I can go and either Control T on this top layer and use Alt and scroll to kind of zoom out a little bit. We can go and hold on Shift and just kind of slightly change that position and hit Enter. And that looks a little bit better. So we're moving in the right direction here. When we want this out at the very end, we can right click on this, or we can even do it now and rasterize. We can rasterize and delete, but that's more of a destructive workflow in Photoshop. The other way we can do it, so I'm going to Control Z and Control Alt Z to keep moving backwards. Now it's back to a non-rasterized layer. That means it's a vector right now. We can go and make just a window around the house on this elevation, the sketchy edges, and then just do a clipping mask on that house. And now the vector line work of this layer is preserved, which means we can scale it even larger in the future and it won't become distorted. Once you rasterize it, you risk distortion, but it's easier to go and, let's say, edit later as far as deleting lines out. But we'll use a clipping mask to get the SketchUp logo off of there. All right, so from here, let's just go and throw in a tree. So it's really easy if you go to the website I was showing with like Mr. Cutout, right? You can get a tree with like transparent background already, which is kind of great. So here in Photoshop, I already have one that's in a file here. I'm just going to go and take this tree and just throw it right on top. And so we'll hit Enter on that. And then this tree here, I need to move it down slightly, kind of align that to the ground. And there's some other adjustments I would probably make, but you can see there's like a white background here. We'll just go and use Multiply to make that transparent. Anything white becomes transparent. And then if we wanted to throw it behind the house, we just need to throw it behind all of our layers here, right? We can go and throw it in the back here. And if we throw it behind, you'll see it'll be behind the textures. So once everything's assigned to the house material, so you can go and throw a tree behind there real easily. And then based on our inspiration, there's a few other things that was going on. So they had like a ground plane that was drawn with a brush. So I'm going to go and hit the brush here, and I'm going to go and grab like a kind of a dark gray. We can even take it from our color palette. So let me show you how to incorporate the color palette here into your drawing. We're just going to go and drop in these gray to black tones. Hit enter. Drop the color palette in the back, and we'll use the eyedropper tool to take this like color here and hide that then. And then we'll go to the brush, and on a new layer, let's call it ground plane. And then with ground plane, with the brush, we're going to go and drop down and choose brush edge. We use the brackets, use the enter key to make our brush smaller. Find like a line weight that you like, click once, hold down shift, and click again. Something kind of like that. Control Z if you want, Control Z. Maybe it'll be better if we drop down a guideline here. And I'll make the ground plane be a little bit longer. Click once, hold down shift, and click again. Something like that. And then let's see what this looks like without this guideline there. All right, that'll do okay. And then from here, we can, we can fade this. Let's say this ground plane doesn't look exactly like what we want. We can go and do like a 70%. And then we can also maybe move it down here or move it behind something else. The other thing we might want to do is take this tree, maybe make it a little more subtle. I like to do that with opacity. So maybe we'll take that tree and also pop it up off that ground plane. What else? We've got our textures. I think I already have that in my Photoshop. So I'm going to go and hit the brush. And then let's go to the menu here. And here I'm going to choose like one of these watercolor brushes. And then I need to have like a new kind of background layer here. So, and with this watercolor brush, I'm going to use the bracket and make it quite a lot bigger. And I dragged in another color palette previously. One of the other color palettes that I dragged in for the other project that I had open was one of these natural tones, and that's where I grabbed some of these kind of olive colors here. And I would go and just kind of like throw some of these sponges on here and kind of just through the back. You'll see as you develop your house a little bit more, this kind of just fades to the background. That's another way to do it. It looks like the inspirational image that we were using here either use some brush packs or a combination of this, as well as maybe a really enlarged tree as like kind of a general foliage behind and faded and kind of out of resolution to kind of add a little bit of texture behind the image. And so you'll kind of see what I'm talking about right here, right? We clearly have some trees brought in from Photoshop, then in the very background, something subtle. Either watercolor or like a tree magnified quite a bit with a lot of transparency, a low opacity. So that's it. That's kind of the workflow that I would recommend to go from a massing model, either from Revit or from SketchUp into Photoshop. Or you can say a finished model, right? Either way, this is a great workflow, I think, to come up with a pretty cool style for elevations. With the pattern and fill, we don't really have to worry about perspective and things vanishing and distorting. So pattern and fill is like a great way to bring in these material textures. Really nice, fast, and easy. All right, once again, give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. Make sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel, and we'll see y'all next time. Take care.